Big Crane on Campus is the 14th episode of the 7th season of Frasier. This is directed by Sheldon Epps, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. I quite liked it. I don't think it would ever be a personal favourite, but there is nothing wrong with it. And there are a couple of really great moments, so we'll go through things chronologically. And it starts off down at KCL. Ross has joined a book club for a guy, basically, and she asks Frasier for some help, and then in walks a woman called Lorna. This is Lorna Ann Garner, played by Jean Smart, and she used to be one of the popular girls at school, not somebody in Frasier's circle, if Frasier even had a circle, and Frasier strikes up a conversation with her, and he ends up deciding to ask her out, but he bottles it at the last second and asks her to come and appraise his apartment, as actually she's in real estate. It seems like a good excuse to get her to the apartment, although now that I've said that, that sounds really creepy, but it's not creepy. And she goes to the apartment, and I like the fact that quite quickly he confesses that he wanted to ask her out, he got nervous, and this was the alternative, the only other thing he could think of. And I like the fact that he didn't drag that out for too long, because it could have been quite awkward if they then started to hit it off and then she found out exactly what he was trying to do. And I also like the fact that she was actually quite flattered by it, rather than, creeped out that he lied to get her to the apartment. So that worked well. They spend the night together. They wake up the following morning in bed. What could possibly go wrong? Well, I absolutely love this moment. I could remember it happening from the last time I watched this episode, so there wasn't a complete element of surprise, but I do think this is unexpected, because what happens next, they're lying in bed, everything's very sweet and loving and gentle, and then she realises it's 10 o'clock, and she goes into a panic. She's late, she's got work, of course, and she starts talking on the phone, and she's shouting at people, and she's very, very aggressive, and it's a stark contrast to the sweet, gentle Lorna who was lying in bed next to Frasier. And it was like a switch had flipped. And it's just so funny and so great. And a really great performance from Jean Smart. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And Frasier's reaction to it, I really loved as well. And we'll come back to Frasier in a moment. But we then get to spend some time with Niles and Daphne. And at the beginning of this episode, it has been a good few episodes since Daphne learned about Niles' feelings. And I feel like something needs to happen to move it forward. And I wouldn't say this moves it forward, but it maybe does help us understand where Daphne's head is at, because she and Niles are cooking in the kitchen, and it's adorable. It is an absolutely lovely scene. And he hurts himself, so she is helping him, of course. And as Niles later explains to Frasier, it's like she was touching him gently and lovingly. And it was a really, really sweet moment. And it definitely, in my mind, shows that at this point in the show, Daphne is no longer afraid of how Niles feels about her, as maybe she's starting to realise she might feel something for him too. But we won't go into too much detail about that until things unfold, and I'll talk more about that part of the story as and when we get there. But I feel like it didn't move us forward too much, but definitely gave us a bit more information. We're then down at KCL, and Frasier clearly doesn't want to continue seeing Lorna, but she actually invites him to an event where the whole gang are going to be there. Lorna seems to forget that Frasier wasn't part of the gang. Was she just ignorant, or is she looking at this successful celebrity now and just thinking, well, he must have been one of the cool kids at school, because look at him, which is obviously quite a naive way of looking at things. So I don't know if she just forgot that Frasier wasn't one of the gang, but he decides to go because, well, as he later explains, he wanted to go to this event so that they could see him walking in with Lorna, with this attractive, popular girl. And credit to Frasier. Well, I don't know if this is credit to Frasier or not, because just before they go into the event, he tells Lorna, I can't go in the room, I'm doing it for the wrong reasons. And I feel like it's too little too late. Yes, maybe confess that earlier on, but telling Lorna just before she is about to otherwise go in on her own doesn't help anybody. And I feel like Lorna wouldn't care what his reason is for going in, as long as she's not going in on her own. So, on the one hand, yes, it's good that he came to that realisation. On the other, it's obviously not great for Lorna, but all's well that ends well, and it's not a bad episode. And we end with Roz on a date and she drops her bag, and her date picks up. I can't remember if it was Spark Notes or Cliff Notes, but he picks up the handy, helpful guide to the book, which I have to say, no shame. If you're reading a book, I mean, I don't think Roz read any of it, but in theory, if you read a book and you need a little helping hand with understanding it or looking at the key discussion points, as long as you're not cheating on an exam or anything, I don't think there's any shame in using helpful, handy guides. There's a difference between getting somebody to tell you the entire synopsis and looking at key discussion points and some interesting talking points. So it was a nice ending. I didn't mind it too much at all. In general, it's a good episode. As I said, it will never be an all-time favourite, but there are some great moments. Personal highlights would have to be absolutely Niles and Daphne and just everything revolving around them here. And also when that switch flipped and we got the other side of Lorna. I just found it to be very funny. So a great episode, maybe not an all-time favourite, but that being said, Big Crane on Campus is still a really decent episode of Frasier.